Everyone, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the last webinar in the Trailblazer 2.0 series. And today we are going to be talking about the changing role of hospitality media PR. So we are going to be looking at how you can adapt your marketing and PR strategy, ways to maximize cut through, the changing role of the journalist and the future outlook. But before we get started, I would like to play a very short video. It's called Advertising Sucks. So this is something that my colleagues and I filmed pre-lockdown. And the video itself embodies how marketing, media, and PR is all blurring into one. So I hope you enjoy. This sucks. This really sucks.
This sucks.
This sucks.
Oh, that sucks!
So as you saw in that video, we host our own events, and one of these events is the Urban Living Festival, which is taking place July the 7th and the 8th at Tobacco Dock in London. So this event is set around 3 stages called Stay, Live and Work. And on your screens now, you can see a list of the different hospitality and real estate asset classes that we are going to be featuring on the day. So the Urban Living Festival website is being posted in the chat, and I encourage you all to go and check it out, take a look at our agenda, our speakers, and sign up. We look forward to seeing you there. So some housekeeping rules before we dive into our conversation. We're going to spend around 45 minutes discussing or chatting with our Trailblazers. And if you have any questions, please submit these using the Q&A function, and I will get round to asking these at the end. And the webinar is being recorded, and everyone that has registered will receive a copy of the recording within 48 hours. So I'm Eloise Hanson. I am the news editor at Boutique Hotel News. We are an online B2B multimedia platform for boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotels. And the site itself is published by International Hospitality Media, which is host of the Urban Living Festival. And we run 2 other sites at Service Department News and Short-Term Rentals. And here we have our Trailblazers, and I'm going to invite each of them to individually introduce themselves. And I'm just going to move from left to right as per the PowerPoint. So Piers, I am handing over to you first.
Hey, thank you, Eloise. Yes, I run a business called IHM, which Eloise is an integral part of. We engage with just over 150,000 hospitality industry professionals every month.
Thanks, Piers. And Sheena, coming to you next, please.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sheena Bhattessa. I actually come from a hotel background, so hospitality is ingrained in me. And I run a magazine called Citizen Femme. We are purely online, and we talk to a luxury female traveller.
Thanks, Sheena. And Glenn, I'm coming to you next, please.
Hi, hey everybody. I'm Glenn Haussman. I'm over here in the United States where I run NoVacancyNews.com, our No Vacancy Live podcast, which we air 4 days a week. We do a show called Friday Night Audit, which is more happy hour focused, comedy focused, and we do all sorts of stuff with the modern way of communicating most effectively with the way that people want to engage and learn. Plus, it helped contribute to this book called The Adapters, which pretty much sums up what we've all had to do in the last year.
Thanks so much, Glenn. And last but not least, Debbie.
Hello, everybody. My name's Debbie Hindell. I'm the CEO of Travel at 4 Communications. We're an integrated communications agency with offices in London and the Gulf. and we represent hotels around the world. And I'm really interested in following and listening to our colleagues today to hear about and discuss the future.
Thanks, Debbie, and thank you to our Trailblazers. So if you've joined one of my webinars before, you will know that I always like to give a bit of background to our discussion. And these are some stories that I've taken, or headlines that I've taken from the news, and stories that I've published myself, which focus on sales and marketing and representation, seem to be rooted at the moment within the luxury hotel segment. And I can only assume that the reason being is that luxury, upscale hotels specifically have experienced greater fluctuations in revenue during the pandemic and are therefore perhaps in need for greater support or direction as a result. But luxury aside, the role of social media within marketing strategies is becoming increasingly important, as we've all moved our personal and professional networks online. And the bottom left story is one about Instagram SEO, and it shows that 81% of Instagram users research products or services in a similar way as to how Google is used. And I can vouch for that. I've definitely done that myself. So we are going to be talking about social media later on in our conversation. And on the next slide, I'm going to jump to the bottom story. This is a YouGov study about the global media landscape and consumer habits. And it looks at about, I think, 17 markets, though with a specific focus on the US and the UK. And across America and Great Britain, this is between 2019 and 2020, watching streamed video content has increased. Listening to the radio has dropped. However, listening to podcasts has gone up. And reading traditional print has decreased, though digital news and magazines have stayed the same. And as behaviours and consumption patterns change, this raises questions such as how can we better reach our customers and consumers, but also what kinds of messages should we be using? And this becomes all the more relevant when you start to look at how attention has become limited. And this world that we're now living in has been described as the attention economy. And if you look at how competition on the online marketplace is heating up, and with the plethora of brands looking to differentiate, one might expect a greater reliance on marketing agencies for help. Which brings me very nicely onto my conversation and my first question, which I am going to direct to Debbie, please. And I'd like to ask, what was your initial response to the crisis, and how did you adapt your PR approach?
Well, obviously, this is an exceptional crisis because everyone's facing the same thing pretty much at the same time. But the rules of crisis communication and responding to a crisis are always very similar, but the scale obviously was amplified. So it's always being factual, fast and helpful. There were a lot of people that just ignored it and tried to not comment on it at the time. The best people who reacted were really upfront, very clear about what they were doing and very transparent about what they were doing. And I always say to people, if they have an issue, to tailor the message so that you're communicating personally. We have a behaviour change team at Full Communications, and it's called tailoring. So if it's much better for, rather than a hotel saying Hotel X says, it's much better for the general manager or anyone put a face and a name to it. It makes a big difference in terms of your communication when you're in the middle of a crisis. We always also said put any information you've got into context, because if people are saying, I can't go to Italy, my hotel's in Italy, how do I explain to the world that this part isn't safe, but it will be open and we will, these are our plans for the future. It's just making sure it's extremely clear. And if that particular hotel in Italy is reopening, then start to show visually, use all that social media, use lots of video. Video is really powerful and definitely engages this visual audience that you were just talking about, to show the reality. So as you're coming through and start to reopen, get as much out there as you visually can to show the reality of your world when people just don't know what's happening on the other side of their sort of county boundary or state boundary, let alone in another part of the world. And the other thing I would always say is develop your recovery plans at the very beginning. Don't just wait for the recovery to come. I've never known such a long period of planning for recovery, but I've been creating recovery plans for clients from February onwards, and those have constantly changed and adapted, and you just have to keep developing them as the world changes around you. Obviously, everyone pivoted as quickly as they could to the virtual offering. And the one thing which I think is difficult and also an opportunity is there is a sameness of response when everybody is emotionally feeling the same thing. When you first said you were going to show a video about marketing sucks, I thought you were going to show us quite a famous set of adverts that were created by brands around the very beginning of the pandemic, which showed lots of tinkly music and everyone saying, we're here for you, we look after you. And every single brand said exactly the same thing. So the difficult thing is to say something which is sensitive, responsive, and authentic, and not sound like everyone else when everyone's having the same problems and issues. And that's where the creative recovery planning starts.
And do you think that these changes that you are implementing, are they going to become a permanent element of the business post-pandemic, or do you see that as just a short term, maybe medium term, just to get through?
I think hybrid communication, where you have a mix of physical and virtual events, will definitely be the future. There's been a long argument in the sustainable industry that conferences should always be online, not just in the flesh, because that gives a lot more opportunity to open it. You're saying no, Glenn's saying no, he wants everything.
Yeah, I'm on your side. That's ridiculous, because as human beings, that's how we connect in person. So online, that's silly.
I quite like it when it means I can go somewhere in the world that I wouldn't otherwise be able to go though. So, and I think you've seen lots of innovation. So there's a really great virtual trip company called virtualtours.io where you just follow a guide around Uzbekistan or wherever, somewhere I'm not going to go in the near term, but actually to be able to feel I can see another part of the world. It's opened a door to me in places I wouldn't have been able to go to otherwise, as well as limit me. So I think there's still an opportunity to keep a virtual world and a physical world together. Though I do prefer face to face. If I can get to Uzbekistan myself, I'd be there.
Thanks, Debbie. And I'd like to turn the conversation to Piers now. What's been your experience over the past year, and how have you repositioned IHM?
We have to think quite quickly, based around perhaps the skill set within the existing team, and of course what our perhaps target audience, what our subscribers would want. So ironically, we went maybe a bit against the norm. We promoted 2 people internally, we recruited an additional person, and we upped our communications, but those communications really with a view to keeping people engaged in perhaps a different way. And obviously these webinars are an example of that. And one benefit of COVID to us was really identifying the skill set of individuals within the team that I didn't even know they had. And that was very, very profound. And you're one of those people, Eloise, and not have an over-reliance on impressions. Okay, we've got 3 websites, the user base, impressions. Of course, impressions are important. However, it's the attention aspect. And, if you have a bit of a debate about effectiveness, it's what people remember is perhaps what they're drawn to, which is, ultimately attention. It's not necessarily the clicks they've had on a computer or a phone. So that was really, the main point from myself.
And so how do you see COVID impacting the ways that we do consume news and media?
I think it's all up for grabs at the moment, and you've had a variety of different media organisations knee-jerk maybe into a paywall or a subscription sort of format to consume news. You know, we held off that because, you know, I think you can lose 95, 96% of your audience overnight, particularly if you don't tell them that you're putting a paywall in, which people sort of did, and have subsequently gone back to a sort of free model. The key with us is ultimately data and understanding our audience. And, you know, I'm not saying we're going to be free forever, but we'd like to know, you know, what our subscribers' motives are, where they're at. So ultimately they get the messages that they want to receive, and also in whatever format. So the webinars is an aspect of that. You know, you don't need to join us live. You can listen to that in your spare time. The podcast side of things may be a bit more personal. What Alexa and Google are doing, you know, tell me boutique hotels news today, and then you get the voice instead of having to be totally on your phone, looking at your phone or your PC. That's quite intriguing at the moment.
And obviously we have it's not just boutique hotel news. I highlighted earlier, we've got service department news and short-term rentals as well, with a dedicated, you know, editor, journalist on each site. So how has the role of your editorial team changed?
It's no longer text or print. You know, the journalist needs to be as multimedia as perhaps the PR company, marketing organizations that they work with. And also, you know, the role of a journalist, you know, you can't really hide behind text now. You've got to be multi-skilled. And I've been really, really pleased with how Editorial have stepped up to the challenge.
Thanks, Piers. And, you know, we've just spoken about webinars and podcasts. And I mean, Glenn, you've been you're no stranger to being in front of the camera or behind a microphone. So I'd like to ask you, what is it about webinars and podcasts that makes them such a powerful source of information?
Not all webinars and podcasts. It's webinars and podcasts that understand how to deliver great content in the way that people want to digest them. And I think it's really important to understand that at the beginning of the COVID crisis, everybody thought, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to do videos, I'm going to do podcasts, and that's going to be the panacea. Everything is going to work out. Unfortunately, if you don't have the proper skill set, you're not going to be able to be successful in that particular medium. So it's absolutely critical that you learn to be comfortable in this online environment prior to really launching something. Otherwise, you're going to lose people's interest right away. Now, the reason why they work so well, is because they're more intimate and they connect to people in the way that they want to engage in content. Eloise, way before you were born in the 1970s, when I was in grade school, they would roll in the projecting machine, right? And it might be a slide projector, and the people would talk on the slide and they'd go ding, and then the next slide would go and all of that. And you know what? I retain that information much better than if the teacher was just on there. And that's the same with the way that we absorb content today. That's how we like to do it. Plus, it gives the user control. While I do a show live every single day right here on the internet that you could watch by checking out like my LinkedIn profile or some other places online, I then upload it to the audio only podcast feed so people can listen to it while they're walking the dog, while they're getting some exercise, while they're doing stuff that's personal to them, and learn and engage in that way. So the reason why it works is because it's meeting the needs of the user as opposed to forcing the user to meet your needs. Now, when it comes to the public relations people that we've been talking about, a lot of companies have no clue about how to react. I still get articles that, you know, PR contacts from people, and Eloise probably get the same thing, that shows that they have zero interest in actually researching who you are or what you do. If I get one more thing saying, for the next Roundup article that you're working on, I haven't written a Roundup article since the 1990s. Come on, you know? So
if it makes you feel any better, that's been a problem for years, though. I sat on a radio station years and years ago, and they were being sent pictures when they had nowhere to post pictures and trade stories. So you're not alone. It's a problem. Right. It's a long-standing problem.
Debbie, let's do our own panel where we just complain about that stuff for a while all day. So yeah, essentially, just to wrap up, this is the way of the future. you know, we've been talking about things that were ushered in because of COVID. Things weren't ushered in because of COVID. Things were sped along because of COVID. Debbie's absolutely right. Virtual hybrid events need to stay, but the only reason why they weren't there beforehand is because event planners were like, well, then nobody's going to come to my event. They're just going to watch it online. That's been eliminated because of COVID. People jumped into connecting with my content visually every single day because of COVID. I knew that was going to come, but I thought it was a couple of years from now. So, you know, think about adapting and making lots of changes.
Where you started off your answer just then, Glenn, about not every podcast or webinar is successful. And I had this debate with my boyfriend, who's an avid podcast listener, and he said, well, anyone can make a podcast. And I was like, but you're right. But to make it successful is an entirely different ball game.
There's 2 million plus podcasts right now, Eloise, and I'm blessed that No Vacancy with Glenn Haussman podcast feed is in the top 0.5% of all podcasts in the world. Now, that's not necessarily saying that my podcast is so great and I'm doing awesome. It shows that there's nearly 2 million people who put something out and nobody's listening to it. So just because you have one doesn't mean the universe cares.
And the way that I view webinars and podcasts, you mentioned that it's quite a personal setting, and you're giving your audience, I guess, options as to how they want to digest that. So if I were to flip this on its head a little bit and ask you, what advice would you give to a business or a brand that's looking to establish themselves as a thought leader, almost as a way to be invited onto a podcast or a webinar?
Don't get confused that because other people are doing it and doing it well, that you can simply go ahead and start something and it's going to be amazing. You need to figure out and partner with somebody who knows what they're going to do. Now, this sounds self-serving because I'm training people to do media and stuff like that for this new particular era, but you only have one chance to really make a connection with people. And if you don't think it through and you don't do it the right way, you're going to be at a deficit. Now, flipping that, if you do it well, you're opening yourselves up to the most amazing way to connect and engage with people that we've seen thus far in this emerging fourth age that we have right now. That's the way that people want to connect with brands. That's the way people want to extend the brand extension into their lives when they're not staying at your hotel or sailing on your cruise ship or flying in your airplane, whatever it might be. So do it right. Think about what the right way to do it would be in terms of cadence, content, guests, all of that kind of stuff, and how it would work in both a visual medium and an audio medium as well.
Thanks, Glenn. And I'd like to bring Sheena into the conversation now. I know Citizen Femme is for the luxury female traveller, so it's a consumer-facing publication. So could you please give us some insight as to what your audience is consuming when it comes to travel?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I just want to jump on that, but I think podcasts are huge and we can come to that later. It's such an integral part of getting involved in listening for all brands. But what they're consuming, so staycations, that's just huge. I mean, it's an obvious one, but with the constant changes in the government regulations, and even like Debbie said, you're preparing so much, you're still chasing your tail a bit with trying to accommodate what's happening. The one sure bet we know is regional travel. So for us, it's really, really huge. It's the biggest sorts of searches on Citizen Femme, the biggest click-throughs and all of that. We're also seeing a lot around wellness retreats, but wellness, also well-being within hotels. That's something that we're seeing, the search for, the capacity for that, the hotels accommodating the well-being of guests. That's a really big part of it. And of course, food and beverage. So based on that plan of events and what things are opening up, looking at food and beverage, what's opening, how you're making yourself stand out, that's standing a lot. We are still, audiences are still consuming a lot about European travel because even though we can't do it as much now and it's still uncertain, I think they're raring to go and they really want to jump on it. So we're still doing a lot on that, and we have a small US audience. So for US travel, we'll cover that, but we're doing a lot of regional. And another thing is under the radar. So lack of over tourism in some places, but under the radar spots, simplicity, familiarity, trust. Trust is a really big thing for travelers, and that's what they really want to have, that reassurance, and hopefully it's exceeded. And I think these are the key drivers when we're booking and planning holidays, and something that our audience is receiving well and consuming a lot of.
Mhm. And with all of that in mind, how should hotels perhaps position their B2C PR media strategy in preparation for the rebound?
I think that, Debbie, by all means, jump in anywhere, because this is certainly in your remit more than mine. But I think it's really key for cities, for hotels, for brands to, what they're doing locally for us is really important, local, regional. It's a really competitive marketplace, given that there's been a year of massive impact, huge loss. It's so competitive. So trying to stand out amongst that is really, really key. How you're best going to promote that experience for your guests, what you're doing for your reopening, safety measures, reassurance, I think is really, really important. Making sure that you're getting the luxury experience, luxury being a term that we can all redefine, but making sure that luxury experience, the guests are still getting, that they're expecting. Something that's more in-house and perhaps, you know, it's in-house marketing, but it does seep into PR strategy, I think, is rates. Rate strategy is really important to look at. And I don't want to tell people who are in hotels to suck eggs, but having the appropriate rates, knowing that you're taking into account the COVID safe strategies, flexible cancellation strategies, I think are really important. I think also the one thing that is really key is, and what we found from hotels, is that the stays are getting longer. So as opposed to 1-2 night average stays, they're going to 3 or 4. So there are longer stays. Maybe they won't go to Paris for a lunch meeting, where they won't do that. That's business side. But leisure, I think, accommodating those longer stays, what kind of perks are you getting? Are you having a cocktail in the evening? Are you including breakfast? Things like that are really key. And other parts of strategy, I think reunions, family, multi-generational, all of that is really key to look at as well. But Debbie, by all means, PR strategy, that's all you.
Well, that does bring me quite nicely onto my next question to Debbie. We've talked about that there's going to be a lot of competition, right? Particularly as we are gearing up for the grand reopening. So Debbie, how can hotels maximise their cut through when there's going to be a lot of noise in the market?
There will be a lot of noise. The first thing is understand who your customer is, because it may be a very different customer to one you've had before. Sheena's just talked about long stay or families, but you can do a lot of research on your own social channels to see who's engaging with you, who's talking with you, who's going through your analytics, and see who's looking at your website, to understand who's genuinely interested in your audiences. Obviously, it's going to be local. It's going to be people who know you to begin with. Probably people like to go back to a place they know after a crisis, so whatever type. So go back to those loyal databases and make sure you're talking to every single one of them. But it's also about thinking in PR terms. It's about getting the message right, so it stands out in a sea of blandness, with everyone saying the same thing, particularly for boutique hotels. Whatever that boutique hotel proposition is, then you have to shout it and sing it from the rooftops, and it has to go into everything that you do to make your audience engage with you. So if you've got your purpose, ask yourself, the world would be a better place if, and if as a brand you can say that, you get your own brand purpose, that gives you your direction. And then the third thing I would say is think global. Yes, absolutely, at the moment everything is local and regional, but people are thinking long term. We're seeing a lot of bookings for 2022 and even 2023, or interest in holidays that far ahead. So don't discount the global audience for your recovery planning, because they may book later, but they're researching now. So the thing about the digital world and the world going digital is the media's become digital as well. So it means that, you know, the New York Times, I think, is the largest newspaper website in the world, followed by Guardian and the Mail. It reaches a global audience. So don't put your marketing into geographic boxes. Think about how you can reach the world with the media that you're working with, and set your campaign accordingly. I thought it was interesting this year, the BBC had something like 430 million followers and people consuming its content in March. And that's more people for the first time consume things digitally rather than through radio and TV. And they're looking for 500 million by 2022. So massive, massive shift in your opportunity to talk to the world globally, as long as you don't put yourself in traditional marketing silos.
And you've just highlighted that, you know, the media is going digital, but I'm sure there's going to be other agencies who are now pivoting and co-opting all these different elements into their strategies too. So From a hotelier's point of view, what would be some actionable steps that they could extend their reach when it comes to PR distribution?
Well, I suppose when you say distribution, it makes it sound like send out a story to one person, which is probably not. The best way to do it is understand what your audiences are reading, understand that magazine, that podcast, inside out, upside down, back to front, who writes on it, what are they writing, and really just live, breathe and sleep that title for a little while, and then talk to that title about the story that you want to talk to them about. On some editorial teams have a separate person for video, social, online, print, separate commissioning editors. So as long as you understand the title that you really want to appear in, then you can present the right story in the way that Glenn was, good PR is understanding your audience. And in this case, the audience is the media. And there's been a lot of changes. So Condé Nast Traveler US and UK is now run by an editor from the UK, and they're still shifting the way that they work. So instead of inviting one Condé Nast writer from every title to a fashion show, for example, they're looking for one representative from Condé Nast, so that you don't have to invite the world. You can actually reach the Condé Nast audience if you go to the right people in multiple markets. So it's a really big opportunity. But my advice, which would be really, really live, breathe and sleep the titles that your audience are reading, and then you'll know what to do with it.
Thanks, Debbie. And I'd like to scooch on over back to Glenn, because we've been talking about digital, online, virtual, this and that. So do you think hotels are ready for this new digital reality that we are entering?
In aggregate, no, zero chance of that. There are certainly hotels and certain brands that are capable of it and have enacted some stuff that's probably successful. But overall, no. Hoteliers operate hotels. They're not digital marketing gurus or great communicators necessarily. Again, some brands are doing it better than others. I think Virgin does a great job at branding, for example, in all different type of mediums. Marriott's Moxie brand is doing a nice job as well. But overall, no. So the great news about everybody being so terrible at it is that you have an opportunity to shine out there by taking advantage of the situation that's out there right now. I mean, the world is open to that opportunity. And if you don't jump on it right now, if you wait another year or two, you're just going to get lost in the sea of sameness, because everybody is going to be doing it.
And so I'd like to pick up or dive deeper onto that. So how can hotels engage, acquire and retain the digitally savvy traveler?
Well, you need to put out content that's relevant to their lives. Going back to what Debbie said, understanding what your customer base is all about, and then creating content around those value propositions, around those things that separate you from from all the other companies. Understanding intimately the story of your property, and then translating it to the digital medium with either great photographs, short videos, that sort of thing. Remember, our attention spans aren't all that long. We're in a YouTube click-through type of context right now, that everything is go, 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 go. So you don't have to come up with a half-an-hour thing every single week. It could just be something really cool. I did a video in the airport the other day when I was flying out, 20-second video going, hey, it's morning of March 24th, 6:30. Look at this crowd. I got over 6,000 views in a day. All right, I may have a little bit more distribution than people, but the point is that if you have the right content that follows the hospitality zeitgeist of what people are thinking, you can make connections with those people, create that affinity of your brand, and have that top of mind awareness, which is going to be so important for, as Debbie once again said, when people are ready to book either now for 2022, 23, or are thinking about booking.
And you just said then, Glenn, that you went, was it a live video that you recorded in an airport, or was it a video that you just, a live video? So what does the future of digital marketing look like? Are we going to perhaps see more live, on property, in person to an extent? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I'm finding a lot of success with doing things live, and I see no reason not to do things live. The good thing about doing things live is they capture a moment. It's exciting. People could rally behind it, but it doesn't just go away. If you do the right videos and you understand how the algorithm starts to work and favor you, once you do the live video, they'll continue to get served up. So you have that excitement, and then you have more of that long tail that'll help get that content out there. And if you do the content in the right way, you might even be able to take elements of that live video, then chop it up into a short video, and then repurpose that content for even more success going forward.
Interesting. I'll be picking up some tips myself, but
yeah, and don't look for me to do that, because I have not gotten my act together. But you know, we do an hour show every single day, and I know there's amazing clips in there every day, but I just haven't had the resources to get it done. But trust me, do what I say, don't do what I'm not doing.
I think you're absolutely right about live video. We did, we worked for Visit Victoria in Australia, and they have an attraction called on Phillip Island, where little penguins come out of the sea at a precise time every evening as they're emerging from the sea. And we did some live streaming of the penguins to keep deliberately for the UK, to keep the UK entertained in lockdown. And we got guest presenters like Michaela Stratton and so on. And it just went mad. It was absolutely so exciting. It got picked up all over the place because it was a really nice, good news story, and it was live, so it was instantly accessible and attainable. So I think things like that, it could be, if you have a beehive, you could, you know, if you make your own honey, you could do something live collecting the honey. It doesn't have to be as big as that, but doing something which has a bit of repetition also helps, I think, so that people
camera on a bee to the bee cam. That'd be fun.
And speaking about going live, you've got to have social media platforms to do this, which I'm so fascinated by what we now call social media influencers. I mean, anyway, I'm going to ask Sheena about the role of the social media influencers and how can they play a role in marketing strategies, and what is the return on investment?
I think social media, it's fascinating. It's a whole profession. It's just grown up, down. It's caused friction between journalists. There's all sorts that happen. But I think it's brilliant. I think influence have a varying influence depending on the brand or the product they're promoting, firstly. I think the strength in social media influence is that the fact that people feel connected to others. And I think more so in the last year, it's that visual connection that I think is really, really key. And they were missing, so they get it through that. The strength of it is that we look to social media for advice, because from an individual, like we would get from a friend or something else, it's much more personalized. And so maybe there's an element of trustworthiness from it. So I definitely think there is a lot of leverage in social media influence. Again, it's depending on who, how, what. It's not the back of a dress in the middle of a safari park. It's depending on what it is. But I think it's a really integral part to bring into marketing strategies. We're talking about digital a lot. So it's such a busy, overcrowded marketplace. So I don't think you can neglect it. You have to bring it into your strategy. And it's really important for these brands to find, like Glenn is saying, this really appealing, or the live, as Debbie's saying, entertaining content to bring it in, that you do stand out from the crowd. Social media influencers do have influence. I think you have to tell the right story to the right people via the right people is really, really key, in the right place. So I guess you have to ask the question, what's the right story? So for me, for hotels specifically, native content is really, really important. User-generated content, I think, is really key. Talking to brands and their audiences, I find that consumers will kind of gloss over overly branded advertising or very glossy pictures. So, we're much more savvy as consumers. We know what we want to listen to. We know what we trust. And we'll filter through stuff that just is too photoshopped or too perfected. So I think native content is really interesting and really important to use all that user generated, which just comes down to trust, the psychology of trust and peer recommendations, which I think is really key. And that's what you are getting from social media influencers.
If I could add as well, I also think social media influencers, I completely agree with what you said about them being it's very personal. And I speak at a lot of influencer conferences, and I always say to all of them, most of them are woeful about telling us as the industry about their audience. So I'm on a one-woman mission to help influencers improve their media packs. So it's not just, can I stay in your property, but this is my audience, this is why it's right for you, this is why we work together. So I'll continue my one-woman mission to make influencers communicate better. But the other thing which I've found very effective is working with influencers on a commercial basis, basis, because they think so creatively and so differently to most brands that you can commission photography, video work from them, on license it so that you can use it in your own marketing. And it really helps to have those creative, visual, personal brains looking at your brand. So it's always worth thinking about working with influencers in that way, as well as just talking to them about visiting a property. We've done a lot of work like that with Sweden, and really seen some excellent results. We tracked who visited Sweden, having seen these social influencers posts in Sweden's advertising, and we're able to see which were most effective and which drove most traffic to the country. So it can be very powerful.
I think that's really important, just to add to that. You're quite right, Debbie, that the content that you're getting out of it, other than someone coming, staying, taking a few pictures, the creativity is incredible. So the amount of content that you're getting out of something which is then usable and so much more cost effective than lots of other ways of doing it, it's a brilliant way of going about it.
And if you're talking about staying away from influencers and you want to try to get people to influence that aren't professional influencers, you have to think about setting up those social media moments at your property. One example I always go back to is the giant flip-flop at Margaritaville Resort in Hollywood, Florida. So many people take pictures with that and put it up to talk about the Margaritaville lifestyle. It's become very iconic for that particular property. And it's probably gotten them thousands of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in bookings, because everybody is sharing their experiences at the hotel. So it's not just about what you offer at the property level. It's about creating a mechanism for people to want to share what's happening at the property and do some of the hard work for you.
I've read a lot about, you know, hotels trying to become more Instagrammable, right? Have something that's quite iconic. Absolutely. So that you are inviting people to engage, to interact, and ultimately share. So that's, you know, you don't even, in that way, you don't even need a social media influencer. But in terms of attracting people to a property, you do wonder whether, is the press trip now dead, gone? Is that a bygone sort of, you know, initiative or a scheme? And, you know, as a journalist, I'm out in the field. I'm often visiting a lot of hotels and general managers. And I'm going to come back to Sheena and ask whether you think that a journalist could potentially become a bigger name than the media business that they represent.
Yeah, I think they can. But I think it's integral for a journalist to have an online presence and their own profile as much as the media platform. So yes, it's important to, you know, when you're writing for a trusted platform and it's a reliable source and the journalist has a voice in that, but the journalist himself, herself, it's a really key part of it. And that's coming back to the journalist themselves has to become an influencer of sorts. I don't think it necessarily matters about thousands and thousands of followers. I think it matters about the listenership of them. Are they listening? Are they engaging with you? So yeah, as journalists, we have to embrace this kind of multi-hyphenate approach to work. So we have to almost add influencer of sorts to our own title. I guess not the worst of developments, but again, it's about peer-to-peer recommendations and your own personal influence. So the editorial is key, the writing is key, but having that influence on your social platform as well, your own following. I think that's really, really key.
And Eloise, that's really where we talk about personal branding, and that's a whole session unto itself. But I think everybody out there, journalist or not journalist or hotel operator, needs to think about what their personal brand and how they, as a human being, connect emotionally to other people and can help drive business.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a groundswell of creativity as we come out of lockdown. You could argue, you know, that creativity pre-COVID was very short-termism. You know, it was difficult to stand out and do something really different. Now, you know, I think that I'll be looking at all the hotel brands in particular and what they're doing, and also what they truly stand for. You know, you've got the big hotel brands with all the sub-brands underneath. I was a bit confused. I've been a bit confused with some of them because there's so many. There is an opportunity for the hotel brands to really stamp for what they are.
I've been reading a lot of reports around brands and how consumers are aligning themselves with certain brands that are authentic, that are true to their values. And yeah, I've seen some very creative efforts, not just during the pandemic, but also as we start to come out of it, It could be a marketing campaign. It could be an advert, something. I think you're right, Piers. We're going to see that groundswell, and I look forward to seeing what people are gonna push out there. And Piers, I'm going to come to you next, because how do you then see the future role of the journalist? What are they going to embody? How are they changing, and is that now long term?
Other than maybe, you know, what we all know about a journalist, the multimedia aspect that we've talked about, if I was a hotel, I'd be targeting journos that know what they're talking about, but perhaps more importantly, what their networks are. I.e., how can I distribute, how can I extend my reach, not just to boutique hotel news, but Eloise, I know Eloise posts on LinkedIn. Oh my God, that'll get more reach and more reach. That I think is going to be key. I've forgotten the question now, Eloise.
The future role of the journalist. What are they going to?
I'd say business with personality. You know, there've been difficult times over the last 14 months, but if you can show empathy with personality, as you know, we come out of this, very, very keen with that. And also maybe not to be afraid to experiment with different formats. So, you know, we've got an e-newsletter that gets written by yourself, as you know, twice a week. You know, we started questioning e-newsletters. Are there too many of them, or do some of our user base want the content in a different way? So maybe no surprise, you know, you do your 2-minute piece to camera, which gives people an overview. They don't have to be sat to read the newsletter, but in a different format. I'm pleased to say that the views of the video are going up and up, which is great.
And what would be your advice to a media company to effectively communicate in what has been described this age of attention, the attention economy? If we're all trying to battle and grapple with.
But keep the answer short before we lose attention.
I'd say bite-sized chunks is a bit of a buzzword here, you know, to get people's attention, particularly, you know, when they're working from home, they've got kids around, etc. Let's just give people the content that they want in bite-sized chunks, not, you know, and I can't remember an article that I've read over 800 words for a long, long time. People, you know, I'm not saying I'm totally reflective of the audience, far from it. But people are so busy, and also, you know, our new subscribers, they've got, you know, a real, you know, new subscriber, new guest. They've got a shorter attention span.
Would you say that data or content is king in that respect?
I think it goes hand in hand. Hand in hand. Content's no good if you're not targeting the right person or the right demographic. Data, you know, is only really, you know, if you're communicating outwardly, you've got to give somebody something that's relevant. So sorry if I've sat on the fence a bit there, but data is clearly becoming more important, based around transformation within news, you know, even newsrooms, and syndicated content as well is quite a big topic at the moment too.
Thanks, Piers. And we had a question emailed in, and I'm going to ask this to Debbie because it's looking at how editorial teams take on different roles, which I know you talked about. I think it was Condé Nast, how they've started to merge. And the question is, Debbie, to what extent, if at all, does the panel think there is an overlap between traditional PR, online PR, advertorials on and offline, and digital marketing? And should these roles be conducted by the same team, or is there value in having different teams for different roles?
I think content, it comes back to, in a way, your question about content. If you've got a team that understands content, then there is no difference between digital PR and traditional PR. It absolutely should be wrapped up together, because we will be talking to one journalist who might be writing for print, but will need to speak to another correspondent on the desk who might be putting the pictures together, or will accept video or commission some video to go alongside it to drive subscribers to the website as well as to the print. So you can't have the two run separately. Advertorials are always best written by people who understand editorial so that they sound earned. But sometimes some of the commercial teams and the marketing teams have brilliant copywriters who can write, and it doesn't have to be one size. It's who's going to create the best content and find the teams and pull them together. But I would definitely not keep traditional and digital apart. I don't think it even exists anymore, that there is no such thing anymore. I think everything is integrated.
Is that, please, Sheena.
All right, I just wanted to jump onto that. It's absolutely, because in-house with us, if we're working with a hotel or a tourist board or any brand, it will all be within everyone who does the digital, or we don't have print, but across the board, it will be, this is how that advertorial is done. This is how the social is going to work with it. This is how the newsletter is going to work. And this is, because there's no point in having it all separate. It has to have the best attack and hit everyone more than once. So it's absolutely essential that it's all together. It can't be different teams.
So is this now going to be the future of media, press, PR? Were the steps being made pre-pandemic, or has this been as a result of the pandemic? I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts as a young budding journalist.
Was that to me? Sorry.
Oh, please, Sheena. I opened it up, so please,
again,
Sheena.
I'm so sorry. I wasn't sure I came into the young category, so please repeat the question.
It's whether you do see that as the future of media, PR, all sort of blurring into this one connected ecosystem, or is this just as a result of the pandemic? Was this already happening pre-pandemic?
I mean, Debbie, let me know what you think, but I completely think it was happening already. I don't think, perhaps in much bigger publications, it's a bit more separated in terms of the attack, but certainly it has to all come together. And even bringing podcasts into, bringing everything into it, it's happened before, and now it's even more accelerated because so much is online.
And I'd like to finish off with one final question. I'm going to ask it to each of you as a sort of quick fire top tip. How would you achieve distinctiveness over differentiation? Right, so we're all competing, I guess. We're all trying to differentiate, but how do you ensure that you stand out and that you are distinctive? So I'm going to go from left to right on my screen, and Glenn, you are first.
Right. I say find your voice and be true to who you are as a communicator. If you waver from that, everyone will smell it and you won't be doing as an efficient of a job.
Thanks, Glenn. And Sheena, I'm going to come to you next.
I'm afraid my answer's not massively different. I think as individuals, we're all unique. As brands, we're also completely unique because it's the individuals that make these brands. So if you stick to that, if you figure out who you are and what you're telling the story, what story you're telling, know who you're speaking to, and you will stand out. Don't see what someone else is doing and copy that or follow that. Find your own voice and you will inevitably stand out.
Thanks, Sheena. And Debbie?
I would go back to the classic Simon Sinek's golden circles and find your why. So find your, not just this is what I do, but this is why I do it. So if you can answer the question, the world would be a better place if my hotel, my brand, then you've got your brand purpose and your voice will sing and the world will listen and you will stand out. Thanks, Debbie. And Piers?
Don't make the safe choice in a lot of instances. Ask yourself, what if we did that? And out of the 9 or 10 ideas that you have, you'll probably have one which is a nugget of gold. Yeah, that would be mine.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. I'm sure we could carry on chatting for a long time, but we are fast approaching our allotted time, so I'm going to wrap up quickly. So thank you all once again. And as I mentioned earlier, Urban Living Festival is taking place this summer on the 7th and 8th of July at Tobacco Dock in London, and we can't wait. I'm sure you guys can't wait. We've talked about hybrid events, we've talked about wanting to get back in person, so we do hope that we are going to be seeing most of you guys there. And if you would like to hear more about the Urban Living Festival, please do get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are now up on your screens. Would love to hear from you. And her LinkedIn profile is also being posted in the chat. And that is us in a nutshell. So thank you to our audience for tuning in. Thank you to our Trailblazers. I'm going to be returning on Monday, the April the 19th for a webinar on health, safety and well-being protocols. And we'll be keeping you guys updated across all the social media platforms that are on your screens now. So that's a wrap from us. It's been a pleasure as always, and we will be seeing you again very shortly. Take care, folks.